Welcome to Glitch in the Matrix story. Let's begin. My best friend isn't the same. For backstory, me and my best friend Lily have known each other since kindergarten. We grew apart for a couple years during high school, but reconnected when we lived in the same dorm in college. We also lived together for the last 2 years of college. All of this is to say I really know Lily. I pride myself in how well I know her. We've spent several nights staying up until 5 a.m. talking about absolutely everything, and I cannot for the life of me understand what's going on. In February, Lily got really sick and for a couple weeks we weren't sure if she was going to make it. I was absolutely worried sick and spent those weeks crying my eyes out, scared I would lose her. Long story short, she had emergency surgery, which saved her life. She got out of the hospital a week and a half later. Recovery was hard, but by late March, we were back to hanging out like normal. In early April, we were driving to the park, one of the only places we can go in quarantine, and listening to the radio when a song by her favorite band came on. I turned it up because we've sung this song in the car dozens of times before, but she immediately changed the station and said she hated that song. I asked what she was saying, and reminded her how this was her favorite band all throughout her adolescence, but she just stared at me confused and said she had never heard of the band. I was obviously concerned by this and wondered if her surgery was causing her memory loss, so I brought it up to her parents, who were also extremely confused and said Lily had never talked about that band. Their posters covered her wall when she was younger. I remember it clear as day. There's no way all of them just forgot. A couple weeks later, she was sitting with my family and I outside when she asked me where my brother was. I told her I wasn't sure what she meant because my brother had died 3 years ago in a car accident. She got upset and accused me of tricking her, asking why I would lie about such a horrible thing. I repeated that he died and that she needed to stop because bringing him up out of the blue really upset all of us. It ended with her storming out of the house and us not talking for a couple days, until she called me to apologize. I insisted that he had died and said I would never lie about something like that, and she got really sad and started crying. That was the end of it. Just yesterday, the weirdest thing happened. I was out grocery shopping with her when we saw her ex-boyfriend. He was extremely abusive towards her and my friends, and I all despise him and try to keep him away from her as much as we can. When I saw him, I attempted to distract her from the situation and slyly lead her away, but she didn't seem fazed and looked in his direction, saying he was cute. She asked me if she should go up to him and ask him out, and I looked at her like she was absolutely crazy. I told her not to, not even bothering to bring up that he was her ex because at this point she was starting to really scare me. I texted our mutual friends and asked if they remembered him, and they all did, so I know I'm not making it up. Usually, her ex would try to come up to her and intimidate her or come onto her or something, but he just walked by us and gave us that friendly stranger nod. I am so confused. I feel so crazy. Someone please help me make sense of this. Family possession with my name on it before I was even conceived. My nan passed away 2 years before I was born. I was an unplanned pregnancy, so she didn't know I would be born, and my mum and dad hadn't even met at this point, and were living about 70 miles apart. A few years ago, we were sorting through some things and my mum came across some paintings that her and my nan, her mum, tried to sell at a car boot sale years prior, way before I was born. They were signed with my first initial and full last name. My last name is double-barreled, including both my mother and father's surnames, and both names come from different countries. My mum and dad had never met until a month before I was conceived, clearly not very planned, and the paintings were in glass frames so hadn't been touched since my nan had owned them years before I was even a possibility. A mystery that left me, and my friend, clueless. This story takes place about 3 years ago between a friend and me. So we were both juniors in high school and had just finished up one of our finals, in which we were 2 people who would take our test in another empty class with a teacher or someone watching over us just so we didn't feel the need to rush. Anyways, on our walk back to the class as we were talking, then my friend found a shiny penny in his pocket. So I suggested we roll it down the long white tile hallway, where we were walking down, and see how far it can go, and so he ended up doing it, in which surprisingly was perfectly in the middle of the hallway on a straight path. We walked at the pace it rolled, with the penny maybe 3 feet in front of us. Also being able to hear it rolling, because it was just us in the halls during classes. As it rolled, we were saying how far it had gone. Then after it rolled about half of the length of the hall at which we started, it just disappeared. With that, he and I also heard the metal sound of it rolling just stop without any ticking noise, the sound a coin does while spinning out on a surface or hitting a wall. So immediately we both gave a hard stop and asked where did it go. We stood still to see if maybe it went off to the right or left or something. In which we could not see it anywhere against the wall or lockers, which baffled us, so we both walked down opposite sides of this hallway, carefully looking all the way till the end of it, in which our classroom was on the right of, and which lead to doors leading outside. Which we also opened and looked outside to see if it maybe it made it that far and lodged under the door or something. This continued for 15 minutes, even to the point of us getting on the floor, and looking even more carefully, and ended up finding nothing, even checking under doors, which were too close to the floor for a penny to slide under. We tried other days to recreate this, in which every time afterward, we had nothing close come to what happened like the very first time. It blows our minds, and we still talk about this weird moment, because for something to one disappear in thin air, and stop hearing the noise of it rolling at the same moment, and we both mention at the same time makes no sense. Interdimensional place or something. In the summer of 2001, I was in a large Midwestern city. A huge storm was coming in, and I remember the reports saying it was going to be a bad one. So later that evening this storm arrives, and I look up and I swear I see this big, huge ship hiding in the clouds. The whole cloud system was very round and circular. That event started a series of events that took place over the next week to 10 days. One night there was a large UFO, like a smaller craft from the larger one, was hovering over an area near my appointment. 2 helicopters soon approached it and it took off. I started to question my sanity. I ended up telling a friend, so we go out one night. On like Thursday night at 9 p.m. or so, and there were almost no vehicles on any road. Interstates were like completely absent any traffic. We go by this big billboard which was advertising these various lectures with titles like, The Human Genome, The Next Evolution. Human Reproduction, Saving the Planet While Preserving Humanity. It felt weird. Like the signs were meant for, not humans, and they were all like this crash course on aspects of human development. At this point we are both freaking. We pull over on a side street to just process things, and then we turned back on the same road, which was suddenly filled with traffic again, interstate just like it should be. The signs were no longer up, or they were, but now it was just normal, like advertising a book signing, and more standard fare. For years I have felt I had a temporary break with sanity, and the only thing that keeps me turning the events over is that there was another witness to some of it, and just a few years ago I brought it up to her, and she assured me she experienced the same thing and that it also still freaked her out. We both described later feeling we were somewhere we weren't supposed to be. I described it to her like some sort of staging area or something. That's what happened. I am sure there's a rational explanation for it, but after 20 years, I've never been able to find one. There was even more to it, and it involved triangle-shaped UFOs that seemed to be following my vehicle on more than one occasion. It was honestly a living nightmare for a while. For about 5 years after I was obsessed with the experience. Over time I've just sort of chalked it up to temporary insanity or collective delusion. Boring kitchen knife glitch that I can't explain away. 4 years ago, I moved into a new apartment. I had relocated to another country for a job and arrived with only a suitcase of clothes. The job came with accommodation, so I was moving into the apartment of the girl who did my job before me. She left me a box of things that I might find useful that I wouldn't have brought from home, mostly cleaning supplies and kitchen utensils. In the box were 2 knives. One was thin with a wooden handle and the other was entirely metal with a thick blade that was flat along one edge. The metal knife was much better than the wooden knife, so I used it every day. One day about a month after I moved in, I dropped the metal knife in the sink and chipped the tip off of it. It was a big noticeable chip out of the pointy end of the knife. I remember being annoyed because it was a great knife and I didn't like the wooden one as much. However, I found that the metal knife was still fine to use with a chip out of the end, so I never bothered to buy a new one. I didn't even know where it was from, so I couldn't have replaced it even if I wanted to. One day, about 2 years later, I took the knife out of the pot I kept it in, and the chip was gone. The blade was back to normal and the pointy end was back. I talked to several friends about it at the time, but I lived alone, so none of them had paid any attention to the knives in my apartment and couldn't remember how it was before, but I used that knife every day. I know it had a chip out of the end.